The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction. Floating platforms carried diplomats from 1,000 different worlds, each one stranger than the last. Some had scales that shimmered like oil on water. Others moved on dozens of legs, or floated in gravity bubbles filled with gases that would kill most life forms. This was the heart of civilization. The place where every important decision in the galaxy was made. Ambassador Kethvora of the Silithian Collective slithered to the central speaking platform. Her long serpentine body coiled beneath her as she activated the translation matrix. Every species in the hall would hear her words in their own language. Honored members of the council, she began, her voice calm and practiced. I bring my quarterly report on Isolation Zone 7. As expected, there is nothing to report. No signals have escaped the barrier. No activity has been detected. The humans remain contained. A wave of relief passed through the assembly. Several older delegates exchanged knowing looks. They remembered the debate 300 years ago, when a young species called humanity had first been discovered on a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. The humans had been primitive then, still fighting wars among themselves, still burning dead plants for energy, still believing they were alone in the universe. But the Council's scientists had seen something troubling in their data. The humans learned too fast. They adapted too quickly. They refused to accept their place in the natural order. When faced with predators, they did not run or hide. They built weapons and hunted the predators instead. When their environment tried to kill them, they changed the environment. They were, the scientists warned, dangerously unpredictable. High Counselor Morthax had made the final decision. His species, the Velthari, had guided the Council for 10,000 years. They were wise and patient, and they knew that some problems were best solved by simply waiting. Humanity would destroy itself eventually. All violent species did. The Council simply needed to make sure the humans did not spread their chaos to the rest of the galaxy first. So they built the Isolation Zone, a barrier of pure energy, invisible and unbreakable, wrapped around the entire Sol system. Nothing could get in, nothing could get out. The humans were trapped with their own violence, left to burn themselves out like a fire with no fuel. That was 300 years ago. The Council had stopped thinking about humanity long before Kethvora was born. The matter is closed, High Counselor Morthax announced, his 4 eyes blinking slowly. We shall reconvene in one cycle to discuss the trade disputes in the Andromeda sector. Far away, on the other side of the galaxy, the starship Resolute hung in the darkness of space. It was beautiful in a way that alien eyes would never understand. Its hull was smooth and silver, built from metals that did not exist in nature. Blue light pulsed along its sides, the visible sign of engines powerful enough to tear holes in the fabric of reality itself. Captain Jake Harris stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. He was tall and lean, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of hard decisions and sleepless nights. He had been a soldier once, back when Earth still had separate nations that fought each other. Now he served something bigger. Now he served humanity. Status report, he said quietly. Lieutenant Amy Brennan looked up from her console. She was younger than Harris, with sharp eyes and quick hands. She had been born on the Moon Colony, part of the first generation that had never known life under an open sky. To her, space was home. All systems are green, Captain, she said. The fleet is in position. 300 ships. Just like we planned. Engineering reports, the barrier cracker is charged and ready. Harris nodded slowly. 300 ships. It had taken humanity 200 years to build them. 200 years of working together, of putting aside old hatreds, of focusing every resource on a single goal. The barrier had been meant to contain them. Instead, it had united them. Have we received confirmation from Earth? Harris asked. Yes, sir. The Secretary General sends her regards. She says, and I quote, "Give them hell, Jake." A small smile crossed the captain's face. He turned to look at the main view screen, where the isolation zone barrier shimmered like a wall of pale light. For 3 centuries, That barrier had been humanity's prison. Every child learned about it in school. Every adult lived with its weight pressing down on them. The galaxy had looked at humanity and decided they were too dangerous to exist among the stars. They were about to find out how right they were. "Open a channel to the fleet," Harris ordered. Amy's fingers danced across her console. "Channel open, sir." "All ships are listening." Harris straightened his shoulders. He thought about his grandfather, who had been alive when the barrier first appeared. He thought about his daughter, who had grown up dreaming of stars she could never reach. He thought about every human being who had ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. "This is Captain Harris to all ships," he said, his voice steady and clear. 300 years ago, the galaxy decided we were not worthy of the stars. They put us in a cage and waited for us to die. They forgot about us. They thought we would tear ourselves apart. He paused, letting the words sink in. They were wrong. We did not destroy ourselves. We grew stronger. We learned. We built. We became something greater than we ever were before. And now, we are going to show them exactly what humanity can do. He turned to Amy and gave a single nod. "Lieutenant Brennan, activate the barrier cracker." Amy took a deep breath and pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a beam of pure white light shot out from the Resolute, striking the barrier at its weakest point. The energy wall rippled and shook. Cracks spread across its surface like ice breaking on a frozen lake. The light grew brighter and brighter until no one could look at it directly. And then, with a sound that no one in the galaxy would ever forget, the isolation zone shattered. Pieces of energy scattered into the void, dissolving like morning mist. For the first time in 300 years, humanity could see the stars without a prison wall between them. Captain Harris stared at the open space before him, his heart pounding in his chest. Behind him, 300 ships powered up their engines, ready to follow him into the unknown. "All ships," he said quietly, "move out. It is time for humanity to come home." The fleet surged forward into the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again. The alarm reached the Galactic Council within seconds. Every monitoring station within 3 star systems had detected the same thing at the same moment. The isolation zone around Sol had collapsed. The barrier that had stood for 3 centuries was gone. High Counselor Morthax was pulled from his rest cycle by frantic aides. His 4 eyes struggled to focus as he read the reports flooding his personal screen. Energy readings off every scale, hundreds of unknown vessels, transmissions in a language the translation matrix had not processed in 300 years. Human language. "This is impossible," he whispered to himself. "They should be dead. They should all be dead." But they were not dead. They were very much alive, and they were coming. Within hours, the council chamber was filled with more delegates than it had seen in a century. Every species wanted answers. Every species wanted to know how the humans had broken free. And every species, though few would admit it openly, was afraid. Ambassador Zintal stepped forward to address the chaos. He was old even by the standards of his long-lived species. His blue skin faded to pale gray. His movements slow but deliberate. He had conducted first contact missions with 17 different species over his lifetime. He had seen primitive cultures collapse under the weight of galactic knowledge. He had seen aggressive species burn themselves out in futile wars against superior technology. He had never seen anything like this. "I will go," he announced, his voice cutting through the noise. "I will meet with the humans and assess the situation. We must learn what we are dealing with before we act." The council agreed, mostly because no one else wanted the job. Zintal took his personal diplomatic vessel and traveled toward the breach in space where the barrier had once stood. What he found there made his blood run cold. The humans had built a station. Not a small outpost or a temporary platform, but a full military installation with defensive weapons, docking bays, and enough room to house thousands. According to his instruments, the station had been constructed in less than 2 standard weeks. That was impossible. Such construction should take years, decades, even. The Council's best engineers could not have done it in less than a century, but the humans had done it in days. A message arrived on his communication system. The voice was calm and professional, speaking in perfect galactic standard language. Ambassador Zintal, welcome. Commander Nathan Cole of the Human Federation is ready to receive you. Please proceed to Docking Bay 7. Zintal guided his ship into the station, his mind racing with questions. As he stepped out onto the deck, he was met by a group of humans in crisp gray uniforms. They stood straight and still, their faces showing no emotion. They did not seem afraid. They did not seem angry. They simply waited. Commander Cole stepped forward. He was a middle-aged man with dark skin and steady eyes. He extended his hand in the human greeting gesture, and Zintal awkwardly touched it with one of his own appendages. Ambassador, Cole said politely, thank you for coming. I know this must be confusing for you. Confusing is one word for it, Zintal replied. We believed your species was contained. We believed you would not survive. Cole's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes, something hard. Yes, he said simply. We know what you believed. He gestured for Zintal to follow him, and they walked through corridors filled with advanced technology the ambassador did not recognize. Screens displayed information in strange symbols. Machines hummed with energy that felt wrong somehow, as if it operated on principles the Council had never discovered. How is this possible? Zintal finally asked. Your species had barely discovered nuclear power when the barrier was raised. You should not have been able to develop faster than light travel for another 1,000 years. You should not have been able to break the barrier at all. Cole smiled slightly. It was not a warm smile. When you cage an animal, Ambassador, you assume it will pace back and forth until it dies. But humans are not animals. When we found ourselves trapped, we did not despair. We got to work. He stopped in front of a large window that looked out into space. Beyond the glass, the human fleet hung in perfect formation, hundreds of ships gleaming in the starlight. We studied the barrier, Cole continued. We took it apart piece by piece, figured out how it worked, and then we built something to break it. We developed our own faster-than-light engines because we knew that someday we would need them. We created artificial intelligence to help us solve problems faster. We modified our own bodies to survive in environments that would kill unaltered humans. Zintal felt a chill spread through his body. You modified yourselves? Some of us, the ones who chose to. Cole turned to face him directly. We are not the primitive species you locked away 3 centuries ago, Ambassador. We have had a long time to grow, and we remember everything. The ambassador struggled to maintain his composure. What do you want? For now, we want to talk. We want to understand why you did what you did. We want to take our place in the galaxy as equals. Cole paused, and his voice grew quieter. But we also want you to understand something very clearly. We did not come here to beg. We did not come here to ask permission. We broke your barrier because we chose to. We are here because we earned the right to be here. And we will not be caged again. Zintal returned to the council chamber 12 hours later. His report was delivered in a shaking voice to an audience that grew more horrified with every word. The humans had technology the council could not explain. They had weapons the council could not counter. They had spent 300 years preparing for this moment, while the council had spent 300 years forgetting they existed. What do we do? Someone called from the crowd. High Counselor Morthax sat in silence, his mind spinning with terrible possibilities. The humans had asked for peace. They had asked to talk. But behind their polite words was a simple truth that everyone in the chamber understood. The humans could destroy them all if they wanted to. The only reason the council still existed was because the humans had chosen to let them live. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Council was not in control, and they had no idea what to do about it. We talk, Morthax finally said, his voice heavy with defeat. We have no other choice. We talk, and we pray they are more merciful than we deserve. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate knew he was right. The galaxy had locked humanity in a cage and thrown away the key. Now, the cage was open, and humanity was free. God help them all. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every world, every station, every ship heard the same incredible story. The humans had escaped the isolation zone. The primitive species that the Council had locked away 3 centuries ago had broken free, and they had come back stronger than anyone could have imagined. Reactions varied from species to species. Some felt curiosity about these strange beings who had refused to die. Some felt fear of what the humans might do with their new power. And some, particularly those who had grown tired of the Council's ancient rules and slow decisions, felt something unexpected. They felt hope. Admiral Jake Harris stood in his quarters aboard the Resolute, looking at a map of the galaxy that covered an entire wall. So many stars, so many worlds, so many possibilities. For 300 years, humanity had dreamed of this moment. Now that it was here, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Grace Patterson entered the room. She was the diplomatic liaison assigned to work with Harris. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes that hid a sharp mind. Before the barrier fell, she had spent her entire career preparing for this day, studying every piece of information humanity had gathered about the Council and its member species. "The Council has officially declared us a quarantine species," she said, handing him a datapad. "They are forbidding any member world from making contact with us. Anyone who trades with us or speaks to us will face sanctions." Harris read the declaration and shook his head slowly. "They still think they are in control." "Old habits die hard," Grace replied. "They have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. They do not know how to be anything else." Harris set down the pad and turned to face her. "And what do you recommend we do?" Grace smiled. "We ignore them. We go directly to the individual species and offer what the Council never has: fair trade, mutual respect, partnership instead of control." It was a bold strategy, and it worked better than anyone expected. Within weeks, human ambassadors had made contact with dozens of species on the outer edges of Council space. These were younger civilizations, species that had been under the Council's thumb for centuries without any real voice in galactic affairs. To them, the humans were not a threat. The humans were a chance for something new. Trade agreements were signed. Information was exchanged. Friendships were formed. The Council watched with growing alarm as their carefully maintained order began to crumble at the edges. But the most important discovery came not from the outer worlds, but from the heart of Council territory itself. Telox was an archivist. A small, furry creature with large eyes and delicate hands, built for handling ancient documents. His species had served as record keepers for the Council for thousands of years. They were trusted with the most sensitive information in the galaxy, and they were expected to never share it with anyone. But Telox had watched the humans with growing fascination. He had read the original reports from 3 centuries ago, the ones that had led to the creation of the isolation zone, and he had found something that troubled him deeply. He made contact with Admiral Harris through a series of encrypted messages, arranging a secret meeting on a neutral station far from Council eyes. When they finally sat across from each other in a small private room, Telox's hands were trembling. "I should not be here," the archivist said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If the Council learns what I have done, they will execute me." Harris leaned forward, his expression serious. "Then why did you come?" Telox took a deep breath. "Because what was done to your species was wrong. And because the reasons given for doing it were lies." He placed a small data crystal on the table between them. Harris picked it up carefully, turning it over in his hands. "This contains the classified records of the decision to create the isolation zone," Telox explained. "The official story is that your species was contained because you were too violent, too dangerous to exist among civilized peoples. But that is not the truth." Harris felt his heart begin to beat faster. "What is the truth?" The Council's scientists created a predictive algorithm, a program that could calculate the future development of any species based on their current trajectory. When they ran your species through the program, the results terrified them. The archivist's eyes met Harris's directly. The algorithm predicted that if humanity was allowed to develop freely, you would surpass every other species in the galaxy within 2,000 years. Not just in technology, but in everything. Economics, culture, military power, scientific discovery. You would become the dominant force in the universe, and there would be nothing anyone could do to stop it. Harris sat in stunned silence. They did not cage you because you were dangerous, Telox continued. They caged you because you were better than them, and they could not allow that. The data crystal felt heavy in Harris's hand, heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. This was proof. Proof that humanity had been imprisoned, not out of fear, but out of jealousy. Proof that the Council had stolen 3 centuries from his species simply because they did not want competition. Does anyone else know about this? He asked quietly. Only the founding members of the Council. The species that made the original decision. They have kept it secret for 300 years. Oh, Harris closed his eyes and thought about his people. He thought about the generations that had lived and died inside the barrier, never knowing why they had been locked away. He thought about the children who had grown up believing the galaxy hated them, feared them, wanted them gone. And he thought about what they would feel when they learned the truth. Thank you, he said finally, opening his eyes. You have given us something priceless today. Telox nodded sadly. I only hope it brings peace instead of war. You have every right to be angry. But anger can destroy everything, including the angry. Harris stood and extended his hand. We are not looking for revenge. But we are going to make sure the galaxy knows what was done to us. And we are going to make sure it never happens again. He left the station with the data crystal secure in his pocket. By the time he returned to the fleet, the news had already begun to spread. The founding council species had not locked humanity away to protect the galaxy. They had done it to protect themselves. And now, the entire galaxy was going to find out. The trading vessel Starlight was a small ship, barely larger than a shuttle. It carried no weapons and had only minimal shields. Its crew of 53 people were merchants and engineers, civilians who had volunteered to be among the first humans to conduct trade beyond the former isolation zone. They were brave and hopeful, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. The Council enforcement fleet appeared without warning. 12 warships, each one bristling with weapons, surrounded the Starlight in seconds. The captain, a young woman named Dana Phillips, tried to send a distress signal, but her communications were jammed before she could complete the transmission. This is Council Enforcement Command, a cold voice announced over her speakers. You are in violation of quarantine protocols. Surrender your vessel immediately, or be destroyed. Captain Phillips raised her hands in surrender. We are unarmed. We are civilians. We will comply with any. She never finished the sentence. The Council ships opened fire simultaneously. The Starlight's shields failed in less than a second. The hull was torn apart by concentrated energy blasts. 47 people died in the first volley. The remaining 6 died moments later when the ship's reactor exploded. There were no survivors. The news reached Earth within hours. It reached Admiral Harris aboard the Resolute within minutes. He stood on his bridge, surrounded by his officers, and read the casualty list in silence. 47 names. 47 families that would never see their loved ones again. 47 reasons to go to war. Chief Engineer Ben Holloway was on the bridge when the list arrived. He was a big man with gentle hands, known throughout the fleet for his skill with machines and his warm laughter. When he saw the names, his face went pale. His wife had been on that ship. His 2 children had been on that ship. They were all dead. He sank to his knees, and the sound that came from his throat was not quite human. It was the sound of something breaking inside. Something that could never be repaired. The other officers looked away, unable to bear the weight of his grief. Harris walked to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. He did not speak. There were no words that could help. He simply stood there, offering what little comfort he could, while a good man's world collapsed around him. Back on Earth, the unified government convened an emergency session. Secretary of Defense Lisa Grant stood before the assembled leaders, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "This was not an accident," she declared. "This was murder. The Council has made their intentions clear. They do not want peace. They do not want negotiation. They want us dead. Just like they wanted us dead 300 years ago." She slammed her hand on the podium. "I say we show them what happens when you murder human civilians. I say we take our fleet and burn their worlds until there is nothing left but ash and regret." The room erupted in voices, some agreeing, others urging caution. Grace Patterson stepped forward, her calm presence cutting through the chaos. "If we attack now, we become exactly what they said we were," she argued. "We prove that humanity is nothing but violent animals who deserve to be caged. We lose every ally we have made. We lose the moral high ground. We lose everything." "They killed children," Lisa shouted. "My moral high ground means nothing if my people are dead." Admiral Harris entered the chamber at that moment. Everyone fell silent as he walked to the center of the room. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with something deep and dark. "The Council expects us to attack," he said quietly. "They are waiting for it. They want us to prove them right. They want an excuse to turn the entire galaxy against us." He looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. "We are not going to give them that excuse. But we are also not going to let this attack go unanswered. The Council needs to understand something very important. They need to understand that we could destroy them if we wanted to, and they need to understand that our mercy is a choice, not a weakness." He turned to his tactical officer. "Prepare strike teams for Operation Silent Thunder." The operation began 12 hours later. Human forces hit 12 Council military installations simultaneously, appearing out of nowhere with technology the Council could not track or predict. They bypassed defenses, infiltrated command centers, and disabled every weapon, every shield, every power system. They did not fire a single shot. They did not kill a single alien. When the Council's commanders regained control of their systems, they found a simple message waiting for them, broadcast in every language the translation matrix could produce. 47 of our people died in your unprovoked attack. We could have killed 47,000 of yours in response. We chose not to. Remember this choice. Remember that your lives exist because we allow them to exist. Next time, we may not be so generous." High Counselor Morthax watched the footage from the disabled installations with something approaching terror. His military advisors stood around him, their faces pale and drawn. "How did they do this?" he demanded. "How did they get past our defenses? How did they shut down systems that were supposed to be unhackable?" No one had an answer. "Their technology has surpassed ours," one advisor finally admitted. "By at least a century, perhaps more. We cannot match them. We cannot fight them. If they decide to destroy us, there is nothing we can do to stop them." Morthax sank back in his chair, the weight of 3 centuries of mistakes pressing down on him. The species his predecessors had tried to eliminate had become the most powerful force in the galaxy, and they remembered every wrong that had been done to them. "What do we do?" he whispered. The advisor shook his head. "We pray that they meant what they said about mercy. Because right now, that is the only thing keeping us alive." On the Resolute, Admiral Harris stood alone in his quarters, staring out at the stars. The operation had been a success. The message had been delivered. But it did not feel like a victory. Ben Holloway had requested a transfer to the engineering section of a remote outpost. He could not bear to serve on a ship anymore. He could not bear to look at the stars that had taken everything from him. Harris understood. He had lost people too. He knew that revenge felt good in the moment, but left nothing but emptiness behind. The Council would answer for what they had done, but it would be on humanity's terms. In humanity's time, the reckoning was coming, and it would be far more devastating than any weapon ever built. It would be justice. The galaxy was changing. Everyone could feel it. From the oldest Council species to the youngest civilizations on the rim, the old order that had stood for 10,000 years was crumbling, and something new was rising to take its place. It began slowly at first. A few species withdrew from the Council, citing disagreements over the handling of the human situation. Then a few more followed. Then, dozens. The founding members watched in horror as their carefully built empire fell apart piece by piece, like a great ship breaking apart in a storm. The Human Alliance Coalition was born on a space station orbiting a neutral world. 23 species signed the founding document, pledging to work together as equals, to share technology and resources freely, to defend each other against any threat. At the center of the coalition stood humanity, not as masters or rulers, but as partners and friends. For the first time in galactic history, there was an alternative to the Council, and more species were joining every day. High Counselor Morthax called an emergency meeting of the founding members. They gathered in a secure chamber deep within the Council headquarters, far from the ears of the younger species who had already started to question their leadership. "We are losing control," Morthax said bluntly. "Every day, more worlds leave us for the humans. Every day, our influence shrinks. If this continues, we will be nothing but a memory within a century." The representative of the Krillax hegemony, a massive creature covered in armored plates, slammed his fist on the table. "Then we must fight. We still have the largest fleet in the galaxy. We can crush the humans before they grow any stronger." "Can we?" Morthax replied wearily. "You saw what they did to our military installations. They walked through our defenses like they were not even there. They could have killed everyone on those bases, and they chose not to. What do you think would happen if we actually went to war with them?" Silence fell over the chamber. Everyone knew the answer. They would lose. Badly. "There is only one path left," Morthax continued. "We must negotiate. We must give the humans what they want, and hope that they are willing to let us survive." The message was sent the following day. The Council requested a formal summit with representatives of humanity to discuss terms of peace and cooperation. The humans agreed, setting the meeting for 1 week later on the same neutral station where the Human Alliance Coalition had been founded. Admiral Harris and Grace Patterson represented humanity at the summit. They wore simple uniforms without medals or decorations, a deliberate choice to show that they did not need symbols of power to know their own strength. Across the table sat High Counselor Morthax and representatives of the 12 founding species, their faces drawn with worry and exhaustion. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Morthax began, his voice formal and careful. "We recognize that the relationship between our peoples has been difficult." "Difficult," Harris repeated, his voice flat. "You locked us in a cage for 300 years. You left us to die, and when we proved that we would not die, you murdered 47 of our civilians, including children. Difficult seems like a small word for all of that." Morthax lowered his eyes. "You are correct. What we did was wrong. What our predecessors did was wrong. We know this now." Grace leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Knowing is not enough. Words are not enough. If you want peace, you will need to earn it." She slid a datapad across the table. Morthax picked it up and read through the terms, his 4 eyes widening with each paragraph. "Full recognition of human sovereignty over all territories we currently occupy or will occupy in the future. Reparations for the 3 centuries of isolation, to be paid over the next 50 years. Complete dissolution of all quarantine laws and the isolation zone protocol. A formal apology, broadcast to every inhabited system in the galaxy." He looked up from the pad. "These terms are harsh." "These terms are fair," Harris replied. "We could ask for much more. We could demand the dissolution of the Council itself. We could demand territory, resources, technology. Instead, we ask only for recognition of what was done to us and assurance that it will never happen again." The founding species representatives huddled together, whispering urgently in their various languages. Morthax watched them with tired eyes. He already knew what the decision would be. There was no other choice. "We accept your terms," he said finally. The signing ceremony took place an hour later. Morthax pressed his official seal to the document with trembling appendages, watched by billions across the galaxy through live broadcast. When it was done, He set down the seal and looked at Harris with something approaching genuine curiosity. "May I ask you a question, Admiral?" Harris nodded. "We have studied your species for centuries, both before and after the isolation zone. We have run countless simulations and predictions, and there is one thing I have never understood." Morthax paused, gathering his thoughts. "What would you have become if we had welcomed you instead of caging you? Would you have been our friends? Our allies? Could things have been different?" Harris was silent for a long moment. He thought about the generations that had lived and died behind the barrier. He thought about Ben Holloway, sitting alone in a distant outpost, mourning a family that should still be alive. He thought about all the pain and sacrifice that had brought humanity to this moment. "We do not know," he finally answered. "We will never know. But we know what we became because you caged us. You made us fight for every star, every advancement, every breath. You made us earn our place in this galaxy the hard way." He stood and looked down at the council representatives, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps you should be grateful that we still remember how to show mercy. Many species, after what was done to us, would not." The summit ended. The documents were filed. The broadcasts went silent, and humanity took its place among the stars. Not as newcomers begging for acceptance, but as survivors who had forged themselves in the darkness of isolation. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy slowly adjusted to the new order. The Council continued to exist, but its power was broken. The Human Alliance coalition grew stronger with each passing day. Old hatreds began to fade, replaced by cautious cooperation and eventually, genuine partnership. Admiral Harris retired from active duty a year later. He bought a small house on a quiet world at the edge of human space, a place where he could watch the stars without thinking about battles and treaties. Sometimes Grace Patterson would visit, and they would sit together in comfortable silence, two old soldiers enjoying a peace they had never expected to see. The isolation zone was gone. Its barrier had crumbled into nothing, but its legacy lived on in every human heart, a reminder of what they had endured and what they had overcome. They had been caged, they had been forgotten, they had been left to die. But they had not died. They had risen, and now, the galaxy belonged to them too.